Just a few words of introduction before we go to the subject for the day, which, as you know, is urban food futures. My name is Priya Joshi. I'm the co-founder of Foodwise, and I'm here together with our team, Srijata and Chaitali, as well as with Alice, who is from the University of Gastronomic Sciences of Polenzo, Italy. And today's webinar is one of a series of 6 webinars that we are doing over this week and also since the past week within the broader context of what we call STHIRA, which is our Sustainable Food Innovation Challenge for university students in India. It is a collaboration between the University of Gastronomic Sciences and us, Foodwise. And this year it is our 2nd edition. And the purpose of the Innovation Challenge this year as well is to engage young people, students in India, in a learning and an ideation program to come up with, to see what ideas we can come up with to solve for some of the most important and also, frankly, some of the most complex challenges with regards to the future of food. And one of the themes which we are covering today is urban food futures, which is really, how can we imagine urban places and cities to be, places that are a thriving ecosystem for healthy relationships between humans and nature, but particularly through the lens of food, and especially as the world becomes more and more urbanized. So thank you for being here. The session is for everyone, and especially for students who have decided to participate or who are considering to participate in STHIRA this year. Before I introduce our 2 speakers for today, I will hand over to Alice to briefly introduce herself as well as the university.
Thank you, Priya. Hi, everyone. I'm Alice. I'm part of the executive committee at the University of Gastronomic Sciences in Italy. For those of you who've never heard of the university was born in 2004 by an idea of Slow Food International. We are a small university, but very international. 40% of our student body come from outside of Italy. And we are at the moment the only university in the world who is solely dedicated to the study of gastronomic sciences, so food studies and food sciences from a 360 degrees point of view with an interdisciplinary approach. This is the 2nd year in a row that we are running the STHIRA challenge, and we are very enthusiastic of how it went last year and very looking forward to the ideas that will be presented for this year challenge. Thank you, Priya. Thank you, everyone, for participating.
Thanks so much, Alice. I'm going to just quickly introduce our 2 speakers for today. First, we have Dr. Elena Poli. She is an anthropologist. She is a research associate at the University of Gastronomic Sciences, and in particular is going to introduce, the subject of food in urban spaces, particularly in cities. And then following her, I'll kind of say our main speaker for today is Sheetal Patil. Sheetal is the head of academics and research at the Indian Institute of Human Settlements. And her own areas of research and practice include agri-food systems, especially urban and what are known as peri-urban, which is outside or on the outskirts of urban places food systems, climate change adaptation, and urban sustainability. And the IIHS is an institution actually that we have been following closely and have a lot of regard for. And in particular, in the recent past, we came across some work that they had done to define an agenda, a point of view for agriculture in urban cities in India. So we were really keen and hopeful. You just have to excuse me. That's my father's phone, but I'm going to say what I have to say and then hand over to Sheetal. Really hoping that that someone from IIHS could come and shed light on this important subject. So, Elena and Sheetal, thank you so much for doing this. I'm going to hand over to Elena, who's going to introduce the subject, and then Sheetal, over to you after that.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your introduction, and overall, thank you to all of you to lead this project, which is really important and relevant, and to ask me to join you with this really relevant and urgent topic, which is food in urban area in the world. So okay, we can start. So. The topic of shaping urban foodscape is really relevant because in our century, urbanization is reshaping global priorities around food security in all over the world. By 2050, in fact, over 70% of the world's population will live in the cities, and cities will become the center stage of food-related challenges. We can no longer think of food as something that simply comes from the countryside, but cities must evolve into active, sustainable, and integrated food ecosystem. Food is not just about agriculture or logistics. It's a structural issues, and it's really deeply tied to poverty, to governance, to the environment, to public health, to urban cultures more in general. Today, 1.7 billion people are facing food insecurity, and they live in urban and peri-urban areas, especially in the so-called developing countries. Undernutrition, nutrient deficiencies, and obesity often exist side by side. This reflects a deeply unequal systems where supermarket-driven food models have reshaped diets, encouraged processed food consumption, of course, inspired to Western habits and to a Western idea of development itself, and sidelined local producers. One of the biggest challenges is, of course, the food waste, because cities generate enormous amount of food waste while millions go hungry. This problem is even more urgent in the so-called informal settlement, which are home to over 1 billion people all over the world. And in this kind of informal settlement, essential services are often missing, and food insecurity became a chronic condition. In cities like Dhaka, Port-au-Prince, or Kampala, and of course others in the world, urban malnutrition levels often exceed those in rural areas. So just to give a dimension of the problem. To shape urban food future, which is of course the topic of today, we need to recognize that cities are key spaces for thinking about and acting overall on food issues. Studying the urban food system means looking at all the activities connected to food, from production to consumption, while also considering the policies, the infrastructures, and people involved. So we need to take into account a holistic approach to food system. From these perspectives, it's crucial to connect the right to the food with the right to the city. The right to the food means recognizing it as a fundamental human right that institutions must respect, must protect, and must fulfill. The right to the city means having a say in how urban space is used and how its resources are managed. Gaining access to food also means gaining access to land, participating in public space in policies and spaces, and recognizing the informal food-related work that sustains so many lives. The connection between urbanization and food security is still poorly understood, generically speaking, in the academy. One reason is that most approaches today are shaped by neurocentric perspectives, which relies on a strong divide between city and countryside, between urban and rural. This perspective came from colonial-era planning model that exported a functional separation rooted in European urban design. These models continue to influence nowadays how policies are made and how people see the cities, especially in the way urban edges are treated at peripheral space, modeled on the urban planning of the global north, the so-called global north, if you permit me this simplification. But in countries like India or also Mexico, where I've conducted a long-term field work, started in 2021, and a new field work this year, urban expansions created peri-urban areas that are not just outskirts, but complex zone when rural and urban practices and institutions mix. These peri-urban territories are dynamic and full of potential, particularly for biosocial reproduction, and deserve much more attention. Rethinking the rural-urban relationship means adopting a more continuous vision, one that is able to capture the social, ecological, economic interconnection needed to strengthen the food security. Food security itself involves several key dimensions. Some of them are availability, access, use, stability, and sustainability, and overall agency. In vulnerable areas of larger city, all of them are often serious concern, but today, to introduce our topic and our lecture, I suggest to adopt the agency perspectives, the agency as perception. Agency, in fact, is the ability to act and shape on one's environment. Even if in condition of extreme poverty it's seriously limited, it could be seriously limited, spaces for participation and recognition do exist in the most part of the world's urban areas. These spaces are where alternative strategies take root, strategies based on collective actions, public support. They aren't always driven by the market, but by social networks, local initiatives, public programs that help to ensure access to healthy food for the most vulnerable, especially in time of crisis. At the same time, they strengthen social ties within the cities. In particular, urban and peri-urban agriculture has become central to global discussions since the 90s, thanks to its potential to tackle food insecurity, unemployment, climate change, social cohesion. It brings food production closer to where people live, using underutilized spaces, as for example, rooftops, courtyards, road verges, and plays a crucial role in informal areas overall. In recent years, many cities around the world have embraced initiatives and innovations in urban farming model adapted to their social, economic, climate, and cultural context. For example, just to mention some example, in Rosario, Argentina, low-income residents are given access to public land to grow pesticide-free vegetables, producing more than 2,500 tons of food per year. It's a great mass of food. In Medellin, in Colombia, small family gardens together into thick urban spaces provide food for both home use and local markets. In Accra, in Ghana, urban agriculture is found everywhere, in alleyways, under power lines, along drainage canals, everywhere, with a well-established supply chain involving mostly male farmers and female vendors in the neighborhood markets. In Bihar, in India, sorry for the pronunciation, the government has supported the installation of over 230 rooftop gardens with subsidies, training, and materials, helping families access healthier diets and extra income. Sometimes, urban farming rely on techniques like hydroponic and vertical farming, but they often remain out of reach for many. More inclusive practices, such as urban agroecology, for example, offer practicals and fairer alternatives. Traditional markets and informal food sales are often hidden, but they are vital pillars of urban food system. They provide access to fresh, diverse, and affordable food, often in small quantities or on credit, which is essential for people with irregular incomes. In many countries, over 90% of fruit and vegetables are bought in this kind of markets. But they are more than commercial spaces. They are places of social connection, cultural exchange, and community life, especially for women. However, these systems are threatened by both the lack of legal recognition and formalization efforts when they turn into gentrification processes that push out original vendors and customers. Community kitchens are another tools which offer free and low-cost meals and help build social cohesion. In some countries, they're supported by public policies and source their food from local producers. In others, are completely based on voluntary efforts. Food banks collect surplus food from business and redistribute it overall based on voluntary action. Public food procurement programs like school and hospital meals often provide the only guaranteed daily meal for many children all over the world. Together, these practices and, of course, other practices that are closely connected to the specificity of different kind of local context are example of urban food resilience, meaning the collective ability to learn, to adapt, and to transform the structural causes of vulnerability. Resilience becomes especially visible during emergency, which often open up spaces for self-sufficiency, autonomy, and community. During the pandemic, my first fieldwork was during the pandemic of the COVID-19 in the Mexican state of Oaxaca, for example. But in general, all over the world, during the pandemic, many cities activated and strengthened solidarity-based practices. For instance, across Latin America, network of the so-called ollas comunitarias, which in English sounds as community cooking pots, provided daily meals to hundreds of thousands of people. In Cape Town, NGOs and universities supported community kitchens that combined food distribution with nutrition education, reinforcing social ties. These solidarity networks, born in crisis, became alternative forms of social infrastructures, offering not just food, but care, organization, and empowerment. Imagining fairer urban food futures require more than new policies. It calls for a radical shift in how we design change, both in food and in the cities. Social research offers participatory futuring tools that help residents explore possible, desirable, and undesirable scenarios, creating spaces, arenas for discussion and transformation, so for agency. For this process to be truly transformative, all the urban actors, residents, community network, institutions, producers, workers across the food chains must have tools and chance to understand what's at stake, express their needs, share their experience, and make informed decisions. Research and collective imagination become opportunities for both political and nutritional literacy. Shaping the city also means shaping food system. A truly participatory approach must go beyond colonial legacy and deep metropolitan inequalities. It must also move past human-centered thinking by recognizing that relationship between people, other species, and urban environment. After all, cities aren't only inhabited by humans, and food production wouldn't be possible without pollinators like bees, soil microorganisms, insects, plants, and many other species we live alongside in our urban spaces. Cities are hubs of resources, power, and inequalities, which is why we need multi-situated analytical approaches that understand their fluid complexity. But cities are also very, very, very real, grounded place, concrete place, shaped by these neighborhoods, these markets, these schools, community kitchens, streets, and the people and more than human beings who live there. Understanding them require paying close attention to everyday needs, life ways, and the individual and collective strategy people use to get by. Urban agriculture became a kind of laboratory, not just for growing food, but for building justice, solidarity, and awareness. Daily actions like cooking, gardening, sharing overall became acts of political participation and collective city making. So, the question with which I want to open the second and the most important part, the core part of our lecture is what if the cities of the future were spaces where every inhabitant, human and not human, could co-design living food ecosystem rooted in care, reciprocity, and sustainability? So, thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks so much, Elena. Sheetal will hand over straight to you so that you have the time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you so much. Elena, I think you have made my job very easy by setting this context so well. Yeah, it is very nice to continue from here. Okay, I would like to start with one kind of a disclaimer saying that this, whatever I'm presenting is from the project, which was in a collaboration with many other institutions and also many people who had also contributed from IIHS. I'm just a presenter, but in the background, there are a lot of people who have worked in this project. So although I'm saying that this is a project, I would like to start with one kind of a background where would like to start with saying what does it mean to imagine food for the urban planet? Like Alina really very nicely put it down that how much we are going to be urban in upcoming years. I would say 2 out of 3 individuals will be in the city by 2050. And this is going to happen in mostly the Asian cities in the developing countries. Uh, and that is where we are going to see a lot of shift in the population demographics, right? So supply of food from distant production areas is going to be problem with many different aspects of problem, right? Insufficiency, inefficiency, all those going to get cropped up. Accessibility, affordability, which were also few points that Elena pointed out as so important to consider when we talk about food in the city, are going to be problem because um, there is simply going to be a you know going to be a issue of how do you reach all the food that is there produced in the far off places to the people in an affordable kind of a rate prices to in the city, which is going to lead to urban food insecurity and many other problems which will be uh, joining to that. And there is also another point of concern is that there's always a competition for land, right, in the urban and peri-urban areas, where most of the importance and priorities are given to infrastructure building, where it is mostly to say that if people are moving to cities, they need place to live in. Fair enough, they need the place to live in. So that's why agricultural lands are going to get converted to built up areas, and that is where the competition is going to become very tough even in peri-urban land use system. And added to that is a challenge from the climate change, right? The complexity is going to become even more challenging, even more kind of not comprehensible. So be it in far off rural places or in urban areas, climate change is going to add food challenges in the cities. And the diet shift, right? Like where in the urban areas where what we are seeing now, the kind of food which is consumed, uh, it's really adding a burden to health and nutrition status. Like if you see the numbers, and Elena was alluding to that numbers, that most of the obesity problems or other malnutrition problems are observed in cities more than in rural areas. So having all those things in mind, I would just like to bring everybody's attention to this framework, which I always go back to and see that, whether we have kind of understood these linkages. This was developed by Sato and Ramakuti in 2016, and they were talking about the link between urbanization and the food system. And what simply it is telling is that wherever there is a dotted line and a continuous line, there is a difference. I mean, the dotted line in the orange color shows that there are established linkages between what do we call it as built up area expansion or loss of agricultural land, which is very direct and very intuitive. We know that. And those are the things that are there in this framework. And these are undotted, like the dotted lines in the gray color, which are unexplored linkages. That is where the problems are going to crop up. Something like how more people in cities and loss of agricultural land. That is not explored at all. So demographic change and the loss of agricultural land is not studied at all or explored at all. Or something like lifestyles, which are, work away from home when people do, when they work in offices. That is where there is a link with how they are accessing the food, where they are accessing the food from. Supermarkets become the most important kind of a stakeholder there, right? And also another thing, which is innovation, new technologies, exposure to ideas. I would like to emphasize here more because this is an innovation challenge. And that is where the exploration of that link has not happened. How innovations are going to also bring in changes in the food systems, generally everywhere, but more so in cities. That is where I want to just pivot my kind of a talk here and say that, these other challenges, how do we tackle these? Dietary diversity challenge, energy use challenge, nutrient loss challenge, or, differential access challenge, where Elena was alluding about, this is a justice problem more than even anything else. That is where we started looking at what are the alternative pathways that people are looking at to access their food, or transitions in food systems. And what we found is there are many things which are happening in and around us. Urban agriculture is one of them, but people are also looking at opportunities for community supported agriculture, where in cities people support farming communities in the peripheries or even in the rural areas by subscribing to produce by the communities, the agriculture communities in the far off places. There are opportunities or innovations in collective farming, there are community farming. So all these examples are available, and in different cities and different forms they are available, and we can see them. But what we started thinking in 2019, actually just before the COVID, that there is something about urban agriculture which is not really explored at all. And we need to really think, I mean, it is well studied in global north, in the developed countries, about how urban agriculture is contributing to many different things, but simply not in global south, and especially in India. We started looking at papers and academic literature and all that. We simply couldn't understand. So I'll come to that part a little later. So the project Up Agri, that is what I'm going to talk about. And I will maybe share the link to the project website and other things that we have produced from this project later on, which the project aimed at exploring the landscape of urban agriculture and trying to align, or trying to link it with how it is actually can be studied or recognized as a green infrastructure towards urban sustainability and people's well-being. And that is where the project started in 2019 with the help from British Academy. It was a competent call, and that is where we bidded for studying urban agriculture, and we got this project. The key question in the project was about like this, how does urban agriculture contribute to urban sustainability and well-being outcomes? Very simple question. There were very simple question, but there was very complex kind of a layers to that. And these were the layers, like, first of all, this was only the conceptual diagram. We started thinking about it, saying that, yes, urban agriculture exists in different forms. Individually, in neighborhoods, in cities and regions, it takes a different type and form. Fine, that is one landscape kind of a question, just to see how people are practicing different forms of urban agriculture. But what is happening on the outcome side is is a little fuzzy. I mean, there are sustainability outcomes, there are well-being outcomes, there are different kind of a policy and practice outcomes, which that is where we wanted to actually study in little more detail about how does it contribute. And actually in the proposal, we had written that we will measure a lot of things on the actual plots where people do agriculture in the cities. But that is what the pandemic was in between there. So what we did was mostly did the perception study. We went and asked people who were practicing agriculture and not practicing agriculture about the perceptions of benefits that they get. And this is the conceptual diagram which shows that, if these are the outcomes that we think that are there, and that is where the transition, urban transition, and the food futures are going to go around. Like, how people or practices perceive or experience the sustainability outcomes and well-being outcomes are going to define the urban transitions and the food transitions futures. So to study all these things, so this becomes the conceptual diagram and conceptual kind of a framework. So to study that, we started looking at, what is the existing kind of a landscape of urban agriculture. So we came across a lot of different newspaper articles, social media posts, and then website kind of a news and all that, where people were talking about how rooftop farming people are enjoying, people are growing their food, how certain people are cultivating 40 different kinds of varieties of vegetables, and also how people have actually designed and initiated some business opportunities from all these kind of activities, right? So those were also covered in the newspaper and social media posts. Then we started looking at what is the academic literature saying, like, what is the research saying in this space. As I said, largely it covered traditional farming in peri-urban areas, large agriculture plots, or urban horticulture. For example, people growing some trees and all those things in their backyards for fruits and other kind of a consumption. Livestock and dairy, aquaculture, with focus on only traditional farming, and urban growers, rural migrants, commercial establishments, all those were kind of covered. And focus was on smaller urban green spaces, which are defined as in terms of urban forest cover or parks or playgrounds and all that. So lots of people were talking about these green spaces, but not really kind of demarcating or identifying them as productive spaces. And those urban green spaces were focusing on mitigation of climate change or urban heat and pollution and those kind of things. Rarely it was recognized as urban agriculture, and more so on recognizing the benefits and contributions it could have to sustainability in cities. And then the very scant kind of a literature which was recognizing urban agriculture as green infrastructure. If you add the layer of green infrastructure, if you add the layer of sustainability, that was even more kind of a scant kind of literature that we were seeing. There were very specific literatures on specific outcomes, right? Urban and peri-urban agriculture has links to food security and nutrition security and many different things related to health, public health kind of outcomes, but not really capturing the well-being outcomes. So all those things we were discovering in the literature part. So literature was informing us one thing, and other things were telling us that our hypothesis was telling us one thing. So we thought we have to design a method and systematically study this space. So that is how we started working on. We started working on the very participatory methods, with engagements with multiple stakeholders at a different levels, including practitioners at a household level to even city level practitioners. We had covered so many different kind of stakeholders and households across 2 cities. And those were the 2 cities that we started working, Bangalore and Pune. For specific reasons, like, both were in a different trajectory of growth, though both have different demographic pattern. Could be there was a kind of a understanding that Pune is going in the path of Bangalore's growth, and maybe there is some learning lesson for Pune, which Bangalore has gone terribly wrong, and they could really learn from those kind of things. So that is where the selection of these two cities were, and not really anything else. We started kind of typifying the observations on what kind of farms are seen in these cities. So we saw one category as individual farms and gardens, which were in backyards and rooftops of and balconies of people's houses. There were also individual farms. I mean, in the low income settlements, these cannot be called farms, but still people, when we started talking to them, they said, yes, I get sugarcane from my one pot, which is quite good for me to have, right? Otherwise there is no access to have sugarcane in the city, right? So, and many people said that yes, this is the place where we have so many different things. Our curry leaves, our coriander, our basil, and our spinach sometimes come from here, which we use in our curries. Community farms, like people, when they came together in common lands, common spaces, that is where also we saw people putting up their efforts to grow edible kind of a plants. But these people were engaging in this kind of activity for very different reason, not to get the output from this farm community gardens, but to involve themselves in the communities, community making. What Elena said was, these are the different co-benefits of involving yourself or engaging yourself in the community activities. So those outcomes we will see later, but I'm just telling you that these were different kind of people who were engaged. And another thing was, there were allied kind of urban farming enterprises, which were for very specific purposes. Like, they were doing nurseries, they were doing services as gardeners. This urban Mali, which you are seeing in the bottom right side, that is a company who gives services of gardeners to people who don't have time, or don't have they are not able to, so like old citizens who are not able to do a lot of hard work in the gardens, so they can get the services from here. Or sometimes it was like, hydroponic or aquaponic kind of a production, and people were doing some businesses, like commercial kind of profits from there. So even the enterprises were possible in the urban farming space. And this is how we kind of typified, like, archetype of the spaces where people were growing their food, right from the formal to informal. These are not the definitions of formal and informal, is not really just, whether the space was formally planned and services were there, but it had a very different kind of a definition that we adopted, which was created by us only, so that we can actually look at who falls where kind of a thing. So it was right from the individual houses on a large plot or a villa or a bungalow, which has a lot of space around that house and backyard and in the balconies and terraces and everywhere for growing, to the extreme end of an informal settlement, where we said it was a very small, irregular, unplanned kind of a settlement. Sometimes it is not even authorized, and built with a very temporary kind of a material. They really don't know themselves whether they are going to be there in the next very short future. And the growing were usually happening in smaller kind of a spaces and containers, and all kinds of alternative different materials were used for growing. This was the pattern that we found, like how many people were engaged in our survey. Like, we did the online survey also to ask people about whether do you engage in urban agriculture, what is your background, what is your occupation, age, and a small little questionnaire that we had discussed, spread across. And this was from entire country. Like, we didn't have a control over getting responses only from Bangalore. So this was from entire country. So we got around 441 responses, and that this is how the spread was. Main thing to kind of note here was about the occupation, like, people who were in private sector, homemakers and self-employed were kind of more into this kind of activities. then we started looking at, the motivations and reasons, and all these results are now kind of disaggregated by formal and informal settlements. So around 300 responses from formal settlements and 61 from informal, just because in informal settlements we couldn't do the survey on any kind of a digital media. We had to go ourselves and do in-person survey, and that is why the number is less. But in the formal settlements, as understood, like they were having access to different kind of digital devices, so they could respond to the survey themselves. In this, we can see the motivation, although it is, people say that it is a hobby or a pastime. The second best example, best kind of a motivation factor was growing their own food. So that was something to note, for that people were actually thinking about where their food coming from, how safe it is to eat, where it is coming from, and how fresh it is. So those were the reasons that people gave us to say that, that is why we want to grow our own food. This was intuitive. People had in backyard spaces, like, informal settlements simply couldn't grow in their balconies and terraces because they didn't have the terrace. For example, they had a tin roof, they couldn't do it in that. So they kept telling that we do it in the backyard. So that is why there is a maximum in the informal settlements in backyards. Types of food grown, and we can see here uh, food, or different types of plants. We can see here they are mostly growing vegetables, tubers, herbs, medicinal plants, fruit trees, and all that. Although there are many people who are also growing flowering plants and ornaments, because that also has a very special place in our worships and pujas and all that, which we believe that is incomplete without offering flowers to our deities. So people also had those kind of practices. And we also asked them about their perceptions about contributions to very different things in terms of how. Sorry, did I do something?
I think you just may have to go back to screen
Slides.
share,
Oh,
not screen share, back to slideshow.
Oh,
And I think you went back to the first to the title slide sheet. No problem. Please take your time.
I'm so sorry. Okay. Is it now?
Yeah,
Back
you're
to
back.
the
Yeah,
slides. Okay.
that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to get rid of this bar, which is blocking my title on the slides. So, okay. Fine. So sustainability outcomes, we had various different questions to all these, both the settlements, asking about, do you think that it helps regulate temperature in your house? Do you think it helps in water conservation? Do you think it helps in recycling household waste? Is saving energy because the temperatures are lower because you are growing many things around your house? Does it lead to more biodiversity? And these were the responses. People were unanimously responding to how they agree to all these things across both the settlements. Although there were differences in certain questions about, when you say water conservation, that was really not possible in informal settlements, because we know the scenarios of how the access to water is in informal settlements in India. And that is how the responses were actually coming up. That that was simply not possible, and they couldn't be agreeing to that, that it helps in water conservation. So those were the responses that we got for sustainability. These are the responses that we got for well-being, where I just want to highlight about how people talked about how it helps diversifying their diet. Although in informal settlements it was not so impressive, but it must be because of their lack of space that they had, and how many varieties of things that they could grow was restricted. Because of that, there might be a response that they were not really feeling that it is helping in diversifying their diet. About nutrition, almost people were really agreeing that it was helping them to improve their nutrition uptake. People were also talking about physical and mental health, and that is where when we said mental health, both formal and informal settlements had a very common kind of answer to that. Similarly, more well-being related questions here, mostly it was about how do they feel having knowing the source of food. And that is where people were saying that, yes, we are very happy that we know that the food is coming from where we have grown it. And it was also providing space for family bonding, for community kind of a cohesion, through building social networks and having meaningful hobby and all that. So those were the co-benefits, and those were the most important benefits for certain people and certain kind of communities. So that, having that kind of a understanding of how people are perceiving, we started bracketing our findings. And in the findings, we started looking at how, who is growing, who is doing all these things, and all that. So demography of urban agriculture practitioners was very clear, that who are these people who are going into these practices, and how the outcomes were perceived in sustainability and well-being brackets. We also started thinking about whether there is any kind of a opportunity to mainstream it, to make it more at a scale, to make it more accessible to people. And we found that there is a kind of different kind of interventions are required for informal and formal communities, because the priorities are different, the purposes are different for engaging in urban agriculture. But also there are other things like what are kind of services like water in the community, or space in the community, or I mean, safety. I mean, many people in informal settlements started telling us that, we can't simply grow tomatoes and beans and all, because the cows and sheep and goats will come and eat those plants. So those were kind of challenges and constraints that people were talking about. And those should be also a point of addressing, right? Somehow from either policies or programs. That is where we saw that current urban policies do not really recognize or support UA, despite there are several entry points, which are simply like recognizing small or allotting some small plot in informal settlements for growing, and make it as on a rotational basis, how in the West people have these allotment plots, something like that. That is where we say that to realize these multidimensional outcomes of UA, there is a critical gap, and that is what the gap needs to be addressed. And those interventions that have synergistic kind of a climate change, sustainability and well-being outcomes are the key tool to make the urban agriculture more kind of a viable and also accessible to people. And way forward is something that we started talking, and that is what Priya said. I think we developed a kind of action agenda for urban agriculture, and to inform policymakers and planners, saying that these are the things we could actually start thinking about. What are the entry points? What are the alternative pathways to mainstream and scale the UA? One of the things we started thinking, we started observing was make it more as a green jobs opportunity, which could help in generating, like the UA could help generating green jobs through skill council for green jobs, or thematic training and certificate courses for gardeners, make it more formal kind of employment opportunity for them. Another opportunity was in closing the loop between the waste generated, which is the organic waste, which could be compostable, and the food growing, to reduce these waste going to the landfills around the cities and making again a source of pollution from there. So closing the loop was one of the another kind of entry point. The third entry point we thought was strengthening the school kitchen gardens to improve child nutrition. Not only just that, but bring these gardening and farming activities in the school curriculum in the primary and secondary school, for sensitization, for awareness building, not only for students but also their parents. Another last kind of a way forward and action and potential we thought was deliberately planning cities with having identified space for urban agriculture. Also make building designs and rules around that which could accommodate place for initiatives like smart city projects and those kind of things, to say that if you want approval for your building, you need to have some amount of space as a productive food growing space. So those were the entry points that we thought, and we have been disseminating, we have been talking to all the policymakers, many cities and all that. And some of the things are taken up, some of the things people say that it will take a long time, it will take it will take political will, and also some citizens willingness to take up some responsibility to make all these things possible. In the end, I just want to acknowledge all the partners on this project, including our local partners here, but also other partners from Tanzania, because Tanzania was another country which was also looking at the same thing that we were looking here, and the funders from the British Academy. And these are some of the outcomes, outputs from the project, which are online freely available. I can share the link with either Priya or Chaitali, and they already have, I think, and they can also give it to other people who are interested in that. Yeah, and thank you.